Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive Podcast, the official podcast for Nightdive Studios. My name's Locke, and I'm here for a very special episode with two esteemed guests that I am excited to have on the show today. But first, I'll get you guys to introduce yourselves. John, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, my name is John Melchior. I'm currently the executive producer at NBC for all their titles and managing their production team. Started out 35 years ago at Sega during the Genesis era of games.
Beautiful.
I worked on carts. I worked in the QA department there. Went to Electronic Arts the year that Madden didn't ship. Worked on the sports titles for many there. Ended up at Interplay after that. Then Fox, where I did Simpsons Road Rage, and they were bought by Vivendi, and I became Vivendi, which I did Simpsons Hit Run, a couple other titles, and Ghostbusters, the 2008 game. And then there I bounced around Big Red Button, which is a startup from former Naughty Dog guys that was around for a bit. Worked in Vegas for a company called Aristocrat, and then a company called Mobilityware, and I'm now here where I feel like I'm at home.
Amazing. And the man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to make him do it anyways. Larry, can you please let everyone know who you are and what you do?
I'm Larry Kuperman. I'm probably better known these days as Larry Nightdive. Don't want to say that I've been in the company for forever, but I have been. My title is Director of Business Development, and I manage relations with a number of our significant partners, including NBC Universal.
It's surprised you didn't mention your prison time. Okay.
Now, I'm going to kind of sit back here and kind of hand you guys the ball, but can we just start by giving a little bit of history on how you know each other?
Anybody that is dealing with the preservation or remastering of games knows him and knows Larry, knows Nightdive. So if you don't know them by person, you know them by reputation. You know their products. It's a very easy conversation to have at DICE or GDC. So we knew each other when we started doing business together on some of the titles we've done, but we were well aware. I was well aware of him prior to, and he has a strong reputation in the industry.
Thank you very much. That was really kind of you. John and I have worked together on a number of titles. I don't want to say that I'm leading the conversation, but I'm wearing my Turok shirt.
Very good.
Just thought we would bring that up. So we've been working together. God, John, it's been over a decade.
Yes.
And we still talk to each other. So that probably says a lot about the industry right there.
It does, and the people within it for sure.
When you guys meet up at events and stuff, is it business first or is it catch up first and business second? How do those conversations go?
Interactive is a family first industry, so it's always catch up first, and then it's usually a rapid fire shotgun discussion about what could be done, what should be done, what can legally we do. So I think it always starts for me. It always starts with a catch up. The industry is about the people. The product comes through the people, so that's where I usually begin.
Well, if I'm being accompanied at any of those shows by Stephen Kick, then the first part of the conversation somehow invariably gets around to action figures and dinosaurs. I'm just saying. There we go.
Or No One Lives Forever copies that he's desperately after.
There we go.
Amazing. I can see. I even though your background is blurred, I do love the T-Rex behind you, John. That's pretty epic.
Yeah, the dinosaurs are always close to my heart at work.
All right, hey, John, I've got a couple of questions that were submitted by a number of people. Some of them on our team, some others that from people that we work with in common. These are kind of general, but I thought they would be fun to answer. Mm-hmm. Start off with the first one. Did you always want to work in games?
No, I wanted to work in entertainment. I was lucky enough back in the video store days. My dad owned a few video stores. So growing up from I think the age 10 through 18, I spent Saturdays with him at the video stores. I worked there through high school. I watched movies every week. I wanted to really be a movie writer, director, like probably every 90% of the population. But I found myself in games, and I found myself that delivering stories and interactive through player manipulation of what the player can and can't do in the game was far more interesting to me. And so I fell in love with video games, and I kind of gave up the other path pretty quickly.
This is not my first career. Unlike a lot of people in our industry who've been in the industry, all of their lives, it was not that case for me. I worked in the exciting field of healthcare finance for about 17 years. Don't get me started on that topic. But along the way, I was bitten by the computer bug. I actually bought my first PC so that I could do medical billing from my home. Don't judge me.
Dang.
But I remember in 1991, the first time I played Doom. Actually, no, you know what? I'm going to go for it was actually Wolfenstein in 1991. The first time I played Wolfenstein, I said, "This is the most amazing thing that I've ever seen, and I have to learn more about it." And that's how it took me almost a decade to actually enter the field, but that's when I got bitten by the games bug.
It's definitely it's definitely something you get bitten by. It's that obsession, right? It's like I tell people here. I tell my wife all the time. It's coal mining, right? You can't wash it off at night. You think about it in the shower. You think about the drive. You think about the way in. How to make what games you like. How to make games better. What games need to be made. What games shouldn't have been made. It's a constant thought. It's like having homework every night.
All right, I have an interesting one. Curious to hear your response, and I'll kind of give you mine also. From the start of your career to today, what have been the greatest changes that you've seen in game development? And I'm going to emphasize in development.
The introduction of a unified engine or unified engines. I think I grew up with several. Every developer had their own engine. Then you had Gamebryo, and then you had a lot of people doing a lot of different things, and the course of correction of like now that we have unified engines, so it gives a head start to smaller teams that can get more advanced and better looking games and better performing games. It closes the gap, but that's the biggest thing to me is that early on in my career, you didn't know whether that engine can make somebody jump or the collision or drive or fly, but now it's off the shelf and you're halfway there, and taking from a 60 rated game to a 90 rated game is what the developer can add to it, but you're pretty much 60% of the way there from day one.
I'll also point something out from the old days. Today we have, what do you call that written stuff that we read? Oh, yeah, documentation of the engines. I remember Matt Toshlag, friend of mine from my days in Ann Arbor, talking about writing Descent, and step one was step one, write the engine.
Yeah,
and then continue to iterate on the engine as you found things that you needed to do in game and couldn't do without the engine. So you were kind of how to describe it. You were building the bridge from the middle out.
Yeah, some of the best game design features in those eras were first bugs.
Yeah,
and you made them they were cool. I also another thing is I grew up. For my first 15 years, 20 years in the industry, I had to write the manual for each of the games. So remember you used to open the Sega thing and it had the little manual about the control system and the story. Like those are like documentations long gone.
I had to open up the manual because you needed the code to play the game that was on page 23.
And, you're playing much different games than I'm playing.
Well, it was like when you had that drive home, you bought the game and you had that drive home, you had that half an hour where all you had was the back of the box and the manual to just
when we picked up games, Matt McKnight. Matt McKnight, the job of the passenger on the way back was to open the manual and read the new controls on the way back. So by the time you got back, you could load the game and go, and everybody kind of had an even playing field.
That was your first dip into the world.
Yeah, I mean, I miss those days.
I do too.
By the way, just to let you know, for Dice Time, McKnight lives out here, and every once in a while I buy him tacos.
Well, you leave that part out that you buy.
Well, now with Space Marines, I guess it's his turn to pick up the tab.
Yeah, I think it's doing quite well. Yeah.
Okay, I love this question. If you could go back on time and work on the development of any game, what game would you work on?
That's a very interesting question. I think Jak and Daxter. It's the birth of Naughty Dog, really. They're coming off a crash. They're exploding. That engine will become Uncharted and Last of Us. And to me, it was an open world, creative game that you can go fishing. You could do this. I love that game. And I think like that game was so inventive and so different coming off Crash, which is a rail-based game for the most part when they were working on it. I thought that was an explosion, and it just showed you where they were going to go in the future, where they're headed. But I thought that was one of the most underrated games, I think, looking back, that people don't remember. But the first one was fantastic.
For me, there have been two games in my life that produced literally visceral responses. that I literally felt something, happen physically on it. The first one was Wolf 3D. When I realized that was my hand holding the gun. The very common mechanic. Anyone that's ever played any FPS today, very familiar with it. But it was new at one time, and I just remember that sensation. The other one, and I mentioned it, was Descent. I remember the first time realizing that I was upside down and that my stomach literally flipped. that happened, playing on my 14-inch monitor.
I also throw in for PC. I would throw Baldur's Gate in there, which became Obsidian, Fergus's team, but like it was Interplay. Those games were phenomenal. And I would say also just recently is that when you first played World of Warcraft and you go into Orgrimmar for the first time and you see like all those other players when that unveils itself, was one of the most emotional responses I've had in games. You're like, oh my God, this is a living world with all these people in there. And I hit the auction house hard.
Yeah. And captivating. It's a funny thing that I tell people that every cliche started off as something that was original and groundbreaking at one time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, interesting question here. You've worked on a plethora of titles over the years. That was their word, not mine. A plethora of titles over the years. What are some of the highlights, and which ones would you say were the most challenging?
The most challenging are the highlights, because they were challenging.
No. Pick highlights, and those two separate two halves, an A and B.
But like the highlights are also the lowlights in development that has the biggest struggles. Is what I would say the highlights. Ghostbusters 2008, because I got the original cast back together, and that was pretty much just me flying around the country getting them to say yes, and that was kind of like a dream game for me. I wanted to make 2 games in my life. One of them is that, the other one's Back to the Future, right? And the Back to the Future hasn't happened yet, but it will. But that one, and then Simpsons Hit Run was a very difficult. That's why it's a low light. There's a very difficult process because you're dealing with some creative dynamos and giants in there. The writers are fantastic. Matt Groening's a genius. Gracie Films put their layer on top of it. But we had referenced almost every episode in that game, and that was a Radical engine. And I loved the team of Radical when they were functioning. That game was probably my highlight because it was so hard to get done, and everybody really just wanted to make a great game. And even when a game's successful, everybody looks back and you kind of the hard parts kind of melt away.
That's right.
And everybody just has this great like admiration for everybody to go through that grind of creating a game like that. Because Road Rage was really just a crazy tangent homage. Mm-hmm. This was more of somewhere between that and GTA, is more sandbox and tracks than it was open world. But like we crammed as many references as we could possibly think of into that game. And it was so well received for a licensed game that's probably my fondest memory.
For me, the title that really moved the needle was Turok. Mm-hmm. Couple of things on there. I don't imagine any of this is sensitive. During the negotiations, we were not aware that the people that I was negotiating with were in the process of being acquired by NBC Universal. Mm-hmm. So the contract just took forever to get done. I mean, the smallest edits would take weeks before we'd get a response back on that. And we really weren't sure. Our team was really small. We had not done a title in the Kex engine quite that way before. There was strife, but not to the scale of Turok, and we weren't sure about how it was going to be received. We launched first on Steam, and it was in December. It was leading up to the holiday season, so we were also uncertain. Maybe this is a bad time to launch it, and we're sitting there watching the sales numbers go up and up and up, and that was when we knew we had a hit, and we knew that it kind of proved out the whole Nightdive philosophy for us.
Yeah, great game to choose to lead because you had a starved community of content, right? Mm-hmm. They haven't had a Turok game, so giving them the classic, like it was a great intersection.
And it was a game that was personally. I mean, we say this all the time. I don't know if our fans really know how true it is. It was a game that was personally important to both me and to Steve. In Steve's case, it was a game that he played with his father, and in my case, it was a game that I played with my son. Mm-hmm. So it was really important to be able to bring that back and be able to share that experience.
Great experience.
I guess this one is kind of a Nightdive question, but what games would you love to see remade, remastered, preserved for future generations?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say one that's impossible would be Simpsons Hit and Run, and we all know why that's impossible. But like that one, just because when Obama became president, even Change.org had 11,000 signatures in the first 40 hours. Like it comes up all the time as the most one. I would say I'm being a little bit of a homer here, but Scarface I thought was a great game.
Yeah.
That deserves a remake. And just it's going to get really weird, but the Jaws NES game.
Oh, that game's good.
It's a great game. It's one of my
game's good.
favorite games of all time, and I played it in high school, and it came out. And that game has a lot of love, emotional love to it, and I'd like to see that again.
You gentlemen have to excuse me. I need to take some notes here.
Well, when John said his time at Sega, there's the cartridge days. There's always a game that stands out to me as like the dark horse. Do you guys remember Chakan, the Forever Man?
I do.
He had 2 swords, and you had an alchemy system. It was like pre-Witcher stuff, but it was like this action platformer in a really dark gothic style. And it did the Demon Souls world warp thing, where you would go to a different thematic world. Write down Chakan, Larry, because that property's out there.
Sega was killing it back in the day. Remember they were doing all the X-Men Wolverine games and the cards. It was Sonic, and then they had the Looney Tunes games, which were doing really well. They did, and they were rivaling EA Sports. I mean, they were doing a really good job.
They were killing it.
Yeah,
that's funny you mentioned X-Men. That has its place in the gray matter of my mind, because in order to do the level warp, you had to switch the controller 1 into the controller 2 port.
Yes.
I don't know why that's in there. It just lives there forever.
I don't know how first party let that happen. So we tried on Ghostbusters. We tried to do if you cross the screen, it ejected the disc.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
I would say that it took about we gave first party 3 seconds to say yes or no. There was 2 seconds left on that answer.
Amazing.
It was a hard no, but would have been cool.
Yeah. It's always amazing the things that didn't happen. You know, you had mentioned it before, but you know, for Nightdive, the white whale, the game that we'd all like to see bring come back is No One Lives Forever.
Yeah.
There's something about that title, that the sense of humor, the sense of play, and you know, so many other things about that just make it a great game.
You'd be remiss. You must mention, when you mention No One's Forever, you must mention Chris Miller.
Absolutely. Fantastic.
Drove that game with Samantha Ryan and Monolith. Like that game, like the vision, like the control, the vision, the execution of the group, the team, and him is like I'm in awe of that whole execution.
You know, for people who are listening who haven't worked on games, it's always amazing the magic that happens. That things happen in the development process that you don't know about, you might feel unsure about, and then it gets out in front of the fans, and something resonates with people. Something hits a nerve, and you know it becomes important to people.
Yeah, it's when Chris was working on that game, this you know, Citizen Kane of PC games, I was off to the side working on World's Scariest Police Chases for the PlayStation. I was just like, why, you know? But it's, you know, you should remaster that game. That game sold well, and that was a great game. But watching that game come together from a distance, and just to your point, like lightning in a bottle, creative geniuses that connect is very difficult. Creative geniuses, making games is a contact sport, right?
Yeah.
And you usually beat each other up, and you solve it. I always tell people it's like every day is a Rubik's Cube with a sticker missing when you're developing a game. You cannot solve it, but then you do. And the next game, another sticker's missing. But like that game just seemed to have an energy and a force of commonality that you don't really see amongst the leadership of the development and the publisher and that kind of thing. So that game should be studied as a great execution.
That's absolutely true. Another question here, and it's kind of related to that, but slightly different. Aside from games that we've worked on, what are some of the titles that you find impressive from the standpoint of the developers, from a developer point of view?
Anything Rockstar does. Like I played Red Dead Redemption 2. I don't know how they did. Like I find myself playing the game in this big immersive thing with the storyline. I look around the trees and the water. That I'm like, technically, how are they doing this? And I would say when Core Blizzard was there, when Pardo, Chris Metzen was there, and Morheim, that kind of group, was delivering unbelievable games, and I know that a lot of them have moved on. I know Chris is back now, but like when they were, because Vivendi was owned them at the time, so just seeing them from afar and what they were doing and how they think, everything they hit during that era was gold, and I that was impressive execution on a creative level and a technical level and a business level, obviously commercial level, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so there's spectacular things that you mentioned. You mentioned Baldur's Gate. I think about that game a lot because you think of all that followed and how they figured things out that would become industry canon.
Yeah.
Again, I'm always impressed at the people that do it the first time, and then the rest of us just kind of follow along with it.
Yeah, that's Doom for me. Doom and Wolfenstein, right? They are the shooter that they created the shooters, right? So
yeah.
They let it be okay to run 45 miles an hour, jump out of a 2-story building and keep running, right? And nobody thought it didn't look unrealistic because of the way they presented it, right? And now it's this norm, right? Where everything's ultra realistic. You're still running 45 miles an hour in those games and jumping out 2-story windows and surviving. But that's ingrained in us from those games, and then how fun they were and how fluid they were and how they Duke Nukem. Like we played that game at EA to death. And I would say another game that resonated with me in execution and also awe is Command and Conquer, the first one.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
A real-time strategy game, right? And I had nightmares of somebody said, "I got a present for you," with the commando loose and you're in your base blowing stuff up. But like that game at EA was funny because they're like, we played it at 5, then we played it at 4, then we played it at 3, we played it at 2, and then they collect all the discs. So like they took it away from us. But like that game was like before they bought Westwood, was just like real-time strategy had never been seen before, to your point. And like innovation's a brutal sport. Like you have to cut some things up to be innovative, and that kind of shocked the industry.
Yeah.
It's sad that genre has kind of gone away.
I will say on that. One thing I've learned in this industry is everything that goes away comes back sooner or later. But you're right. Of course, I started my career at Stardock, and we worked on 4X games. I remember shipping the first Galciv, and the fan reception on that. And by the way, that was a game where everything kind of went wrong on the business side, and I know that because I was the business guy. Our publisher on that game declared bankruptcy. So there was that. But funny thing about that, going back to the first game that I sold, which was the Corporate Machine. For the young ones out there, don't look that game up. It's still on Steam, but the graphics are so bad your eyes will bleed. But the game is still fun. The mechanics of the game are still good. But with Galciv, I just remember that we had reserved this electronic sales right that we could sell our games digitally. And had we not done that with Galciv, with our publisher going into bankruptcy, it would have killed Stardock. We were counting on that money. Instead, we made up for it by our direct digital sales. So, funny thing, and that was also at the time when nobody really believed the digital sales were going to be a thing.
Yeah, how times have changed.
Yep.
But the question that when we like do you point at dice when we're having drinks, right? The questions that come up are like genres. Is like, do you think when Crash, you take Nintendo out of the equation for 5 seconds, do you think people stopped making platformers because people didn't want them, or people just stopped making platforms because they saw something more realistic and something better in shooting, right? So that's the whole, why did the platformer market go away? Because you had Croc, you had Crash, you had Spyro, you had obviously Mario. There was a bunch of great platforming games out there, Rayman. So like, why they seem to just go away overnight? And it felt like, is that because the violent games became more passe, or did the market? I can never tell, because you talk to people like, I love platformers. Like, I feel like the market was still there, so people just stopped making them for a reason, and I never figured out why.
And one of the things that I say fairly often is that the things that were fun back then would still be fun now. If the majority of people enjoyed playing those types of games, they would today as well. And that's
Except for Pong. Doesn't hold up.
Absolutely.
Like I bought the Burger Time 1-Up machine. Burger Time was my favorite arcade game. When I went to the arcade, Burger Time.
Nice.
In my in my other room, I've got my my AT Games 4K pinball machine. My 1-Up arcade. I've got the 1981 with Ms. Pac-Man, Galaga, and Galaxian.
Great one.
And then because of where I work, I have my Pong machine, 2-player.
Okay. Doesn't hold up.
Just say it. Well, actually, it does, but it has to be late in the evening for that one. I should probably ask some questions about something that we are working on together.
Yeah.
John, when you first saw the movie The Thing, what did you think of the film, and how did you think it inspired the game?
That movie had a profound. As you know, we were trying to do something with The Thing even before I worked here. Like that's an obsession. And when I saw the movie, I think I didn't know video source. I probably watched it way too early in my life at home. But there's been like 4 movies that had a profound impact on me, where it changed the direction of my thought process about what could be done in film, and that's one of them. Just from the effects to the setting, to I'm a big fan of Kurt Russell, anything he does, but just like the layer of psychological horror that was placed on that, and the layer of like trust that you could like. There's a lot of themes of trust in movies, and you're like, it kind of comes and goes. That you felt how every character felt about each other, and how it changed by room that they were going into. That movie had a profound effect on what I thought was a great horror or sci-fi movie. After that, changed considerably, and John Carpenter nailed every aspect of that screenplay and directing and that setting, and then taking the novella and turning it into something new. And Outpost 31 was just mind-blowing.
I'll agree with everything that you said. There's one thing that doesn't get called out enough about the movie. The acting was superb. They carried it off.
Yeah, we had some great actors. Wilford Brimley was in that. And I was thinking about So answer the question: who had it at the end? Who had the virus in the end? Childs or McCready?
I'm going to say that anyone that wants to get the definitive answer in that must pre-order our game. They'd throw me out of the biz dev unit if I didn't say that. So I'm hoping that you've been playing along with the updated version of The Thing. Any thoughts, comments that you'd like to add about that?
It reminded me, and to call out Pete Wannett, who had the vision for that game originally. Him and that company nailed that game, and he did a great job delivering that game. So I want to give credit. I'm a big credit giver, right? So people that worked on those games. But it harkened back to when I played it back then when it was in development, right? It's a game. It answers a question that needed to be answered. What happened next, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to replay that. To make a game in which you replay the movie would be a disservice.
That's right.
Because of the way it played out, to your point, the way it was acted, the way it was delivered. Kind of like what we did Scarface, what happened if Tony survived. The next day is very important. What we're kind of doing in survival, Jurassic Park survival, what happened the next day. Those are 3 questions that fans really want answered. And I think that harkened back to how much fun I had playing it back then. And the controls are so much better with some of the changes that you made, that it feels like a game that could have been made today. With the nostalgia of taking me back to 81. I think you guys did a great job on it.
Thank you very much. And the fans have only seen the trailers that are out, but the gameplay is really coming along very well also.
So that aspect of the port or the remaster, it's not a lot of times you think like we're going to get it running and we're going to get it out. This wasn't that, right? And Jason, our producer here, has done a great job with you guys and making sure that all the things were nailed, and like it's made all the advancements it needs to make to be a market ready game.
We're also really fortunate that we've brought back some of the original developers on that. Ron and Mark have absolutely been phenomenal in shaping the direction of the game and making sure that we stay true to the original vision, that we not only stay true to the original vision, but we're able to fulfill that vision in ways that they could not, simply because the technology didn't keep up with it.
A lot of things for approval. I know that.
John, the other thing, back to what you had just said. You're right about credit giving, and when I mentioned the first contact that we had for for the Turok games. I worked with Pete Wan on those as well. And not too long ago, I actually reached out to him. He's a great guy, and our industry is better for having people like Pete in it.
He's a force because he cares and he makes great games. And once he's all in, the team's all in. He's a great leader for that.
I have one final question, and you know, it's the timing of this is. It's a tough time in our industry, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. What advice would you give someone considering pursuing a career in game development?
Be a generalist. I think that's the key. I think when I grew up, you were a specialist, right? You were a development producer, a publishing producer, or an AI engineer, or a gameplay engineer, or a marketing director, or a marketing specific. And I think for decades that was what they wanted. They wanted you for very specific purposes, but now you have to be a jack of all trades because the industry is very indie and very like startup in its nature, and it's a very tough time. A lot of great people are losing work, but like the more you know about how things are done, the more opportunity you presented to you. Luck favors the prepared. Somebody told me once, like the CEO of Vivendi, Bruce Hack. But like I believe that if you study and you're well rounded, I'm not that. I'm kind of a specialized person, right? But if somebody coming up now, learn as much as you can about everything in development, and then there'll always be a need for you.
We are exactly on the same page. In fact, I've done a couple of presentations for the IGDA for other organizations recently, and the last slides that I prepare are about being a generalist. Same exact thing that in the early days of my career, people were advised to specialize, to have a very specific focus. Couple of things on that. First of all, if you make your focus too narrow, when that technology changes, you're out of a job. Mm-hmm. You know all these things that are no longer relevant. The second thing is that I look at the way that we progress here, and we toss out tasks and say, who can do this right now if something needs to be done, and we will get we'll get a show of hands of people that. Sometimes people would surprise me that, audio effects also. Oh, okay.
No,
Good to know.
In the dark days of development, when you're filing, if you have a problem that somebody can solve that isn't normally there, that person becomes invaluable.
Absolutely. The other thing that I tell people, and this is an overstated phrase, but I'm gonna drill down on what I mean about it. Be an entrepreneur. At least have an entrepreneurial mindset. Understand how you are adding value to the company, and be ready to explain to people what it is that you do and how that adds value. The other thing is, if you think about starting up as an indie, and everyone should be an indie first. They really should, just to experience what that pain. And you go, well, who's going to do, and you name whatever task, and then you realize that the answer to that question, no matter what the task is you.
Yeah.
I also tell people, don't underrate yourself. You're smarter than you think. You have more capabilities than you think. If somebody asks you if you can land an airplane, the correct answer is, I don't know. I've never tried.
I put in a flight simulator, and I feel like I told my family this on a plane. If I could plug in my controller in the cockpit, I could probably land that thing. The advice I give production people that come up or ask is the advice I got from some pretty legendary game people is that nobody will remember a game as late if it's great, but if you ship a shitty game early, everybody will remember your name.
Absolutely true. And
that knowing that my bosses are walking by the windows,
but that's absolutely true. That is. And
that doesn't mean it be late. Ship it on time. Just that for reference, your game must be on time. But for everybody else in the industry, it takes time.
I can feel the pressure now.
Yeah.
The other thing that I will tell people, and John, I think you'll agree with this. Again, I mentioned that I had a whole other career before getting into this industry. The people that I have met in this industry have been some of the greatest, some of the finest people who will drop everything to help you out. just people who are generally caring. And I don't think people always know how tight an industry it is, that nobody works for just one company anymore,
You can't.
right? So the person that you're talking to at EA was at Activision 6 months earlier. Hopefully, and there's advantages to that, but that we all know each other, and that there is less of a sense of competition and more of a sense of cooperation out there. We all root for each other. We all play the other person's games, and in general, we like each other.
Yeah, it wasn't always like that. I lived in a world of EA versus Sony in sports, right? And we wanted to win, and they wanted to win, and being toxic becomes corrosive, right? I think the industry's changed since then, so we all do root for each other. But I'll get back to your point is out of the 30 people in that Sega test department in Genesis, 20 of them are still in the industry today. 2 of them, Matt McKnight, I've known. Matt McKnight and I met day one at Sega, which is very odd because we both were lost and couldn't find the door. So that gives you an example of our intelligence level. But Todd Morgan, who works for me here, I've known for 35 years. Scott Rohde was not the test department, but he worked at Sega. And I'd say at least 10 other people are executives currently that worked in that test department.
So, John, when you and Matt McKnight couldn't find the door, didn't somebody say to you, "You guys are going into level design"?
Yeah, that's we talk to filmmakers. The funny thing is, people say, "Oh, if you want drama, just put a bomb underneath the table." But I said, "But in my world, the player leaves the room."
That's right.
And so you have to think in 3-dimensional space where somebody may. When Harold Ramis was writing the Ghostbusters script, he just kind of punched up the dialogue, right? He didn't want to write. There's too much of him for him to write. And he's like, "Why do I have 15 lines about somebody opening a door?" I'm like, "Well, it's if they open the door, if they don't open the door, if they try to open the door, but it doesn't." You have to have all these instances. And it's just movies captivate people for 2 hours a time. And if it's a great movie, 10 more times in their life on average. Book, maybe 20 hours to read it. You'll probably never read it again. Games are 20 hours. And they're live operated, and people come back to them, and people need to understand that people are spending a tremendous amount of time playing interactive entertainment. It is a viable force in the next generation that's coming up because they grew up in it. You're like me. I loved Atari. Then the whole industry went away. Then Nintendo came, and then Sega came, and then the industry kind of went away again, and then Sony came, and has never left kind of since. Right? You've either had an option of Nintendo, Sony, or Microsoft. So my son is 20, my youngest, and he grew up playing it. So there's generations that are growing up in games, and now you have a generation growing up in Roblox and Fortnite that are ingrained in short session, quick games, and so it's not going away. It just has to evolve.
And creating their own content. I think that's the other thing that's interesting about that.
Yeah,
I took what you started with, and then I built something else from it. That always amazes me.
Yeah, interesting industry for sure.
I can't think of a better ending than where we're at now. So,
Absolutely.
John, thank you very much. I truly enjoy these conversations, and I'll see you at Dice.
Yeah, and we will share a drink to celebrate because you guys have done a great job on not only the Turok games, but the Thing game, and hopefully something more in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank you. Nice to meet you both.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I really appreciate your thoughts and insights into your careers, the development and production, and the Thing. Thank you to everyone watching and listening at home. And on behalf of Larry, John, this is Locke signing off for Deep Dive.